Welcome to the Suicide Prevention Show. We are waking up the world with the power of positivity, making suicide, especially teen suicide, a thing of the past. And we're going to go into a very unique perspective on this world. We're going to go on a journey with John Nieuwenburg. And as he says, it's what comes after suicide that matters. So please join me, John, into the studio. I know you're in there. So, hey, there you are. Look at that. Poof, magic.
Hi.
Hi, I love how this works. So how are you this morning, John?
Off the charts awesome. Thanks for asking.
Off the charts awesome. I love it. I love it. So I met you because we have a mutual coach. And he said, Jackie, you got to go check out John's talk. And so I had just finished my TEDx talk and I went and checked out your talk. And it was like, oh yeah, there's something here that is so compelling about your journey that I was just delighted that you were able to join me today. So thank you.
My pleasure. Happy to be here.
So tell us a little bit about you, because unless somebody's in the executive coaching realm, they might not have ever heard of John.
Well, Jackie, I don't know quite how to start with that. I'm a business coach. I work with small business owners. I've been doing that since 2004, and that's largely to help small business owners get their business to a place where it's supporting their life. And before that, I did a lot of corporate things, mostly in retail, and yeah, I've got lots of gray hair, so sort of the latter stages of my career, but it's the happiest stages of my career as well.
So it's really interesting. Retail will give you gray hair. I'm absolutely convinced about it. I spent some time in that realm. You're such a very gentle, soft-spoken gentleman, John. And yet you took a stage and shared a story that was both personal, incredibly compelling, and professionally risky.
It felt that way at the time. And I was very concerned. I had a lot of people tell me that it was a mistake. I'm hardwired to be a teacher, and so I felt this compelling internal motivation to share some views, some opinions, some perspective, experiences, and so I was going to do that despite the risk, whatever that meant. That was my compelling reason to do it. I wanted to offer any perspectives or insight or lessons that I might be able to pass along. The other half of the story, though, is I learned that it isn't a risk at all. That Brené Brown made that point clearly in her TED Talk. Vulnerability is very attractive. All of us experience, things that we're unhappy, uncomfortable, vulnerable about. And when we see another person become vulnerable, it draws us in. It creates trust, it creates integrity. And so I learned this in a counterintuitive way, that it's a paradox. Vulnerability is very attractive, although it's very scary to do.
So take us back to the journey that you went on, because the majority of people watching this don't know your story. So okay. They don't have my advantage of having seen your talk.
Okay. Yeah, so I attempted suicide in 2011, in May 25th. It's only recently, in the last couple of years, that I recognized that I was in a state of depression that was triggered or otherwise set off by the passing. My mom passed away in 2009, and it was 18 months later that I made the suicide attempt, and I now believe those two things were connected. I was very close to my mom and not so much to my dad. And the other thing is that I also recognized that I'd been depressed at least 2 other times in my life. that I didn't acknowledge, recognize, or name them that way. They weren't called that at that time.
Mm.
I was in a very dysfunctional state, but it got translated into you're a bum, you're lazy, you're no good. All of those kinds of observations were made in both of the two earlier times in my life. And what I would say about the doing the TEDx talk, which I did in May of 2015, so 4 years later, is that it was the very best thing I could have done. It was therapeutic for me, a catharsis to have to crystallize and learn and reflect on all of what got me to that place where I decided suicide was a good idea. So it was a very powerful thing for me personally. I thought I was doing it because I wanted to pass along lessons, but what I learned is the biggest benefit was my healing that took place as a result of having to put it together. Just by way of explanation, I made a proposal to Roger, the person that you mentioned, in November, and did the talk in May. And in that space, my PowerPoint presentation, if you go to the properties section of PowerPoint, my PowerPoint was open 22,000 minutes, which is 16 24-hour days. And that's that's how much time I spent on rehearsing and thinking and writing and re-rehearsing.
Got
And
it.
so it was the 22,000 minutes that acted as a kind of form of therapy.
22,000 minutes is enough to change your perspective on something. There is no doubt, even on your own life.
Yes, it did for me.
You said something very compelling, which is this idea of depression unrecognized.
Right.
It's like sneaky. That's my experience of it. I was eventually diagnosed with clinical depression, and that sent me on a journey to understand more about it. But I didn't realize just how pervasive it can be. And, that most people experience it. And it's a natural biological function.
Yeah.
The human body is supposed to go into depression in the winter. It's how the caveman survived.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, we don't have that kind of winter anymore.
No, not quite that way. It's believed that at least 1 in 5, and some believe 1 in 4 have experienced significant depression in their lifetime. So it's much, much more prevalent than we give rise to. And what I can tell you is that as a result of the TEDx talk, I've received tons and tons of people reaching out to share with me their circumstance, their experience, and all of which is to say that if we gave depression and mental illness the kind of attention that we give heart disease or cancer, other physical forms of illness, all of us would be better off individually, and we'd be better off in society, in my view.
Oh, absolutely. You got that right. That's a conversation worth having. And that's why we host this show, is to help normalize this expression. We're looking at the world through 2 lenses. And John, one of them is pure prevention, which is what all of the programs that we create at Success Journey Academy for the Suicide Prevention Society are pure prevention programs. What most programs under the label of suicide prevention are really intervention programs. They only kick in when somebody's deemed to be at risk. And if people don't know that they are dealing with depression, they don't know that they're at risk, so they don't go and find those programs.
Yeah.
And it's a real conundrum.
The way that I think about it is when you begin an episode of depression, it's like being at the top of a very slippery slope. And in the early days, or in the early part of that slide, you have the capacity to change the trajectory. But there's a point of no return where you're going down the trajectory, down the slope so fast that that you don't have, or I did not have the capability of changing the momentum of that. Even though I knew intellectually I was going to that place, I didn't, for some, I don't know how to explain it other than I was heading in a direction and I couldn't change it. And what's changed in terms of prevention is because of that insight. I now recognize the early stages of it, and I'm much more capable of altering that. And so the depression feels very much like a vicious circle. It compounds and accelerates. And a vicious circle has an opposite. The opposite of a vicious circle is a virtuous circle. And it has the same properties. It compounds and accelerates, but in exactly the opposite direction. And so what's changed for me is I now can initiate the virtuous circle instead of becoming a victim product of the vicious circle.
So let's talk a little bit about that. What are the things that trigger a virtuous? Because I haven't heard that term before. I love it. What triggers a virtuous circle?
Well, most of us, the way that we identify, or the way that we talk to ourselves, is the things we say to ourselves about ourselves when no one else is looking. So the things we say to ourselves that are usually I am, I can, or I can't. And so for most of us, we sort of inadvertently or without conscious thought go to those places where we're very self-critical. And so you need a counterpoint to that. And that counterpoint is to have a set of affirmations, which is instead of allowing your head to become full of the negative self-talk, that there's a place that you can say, well, no, I have a positive place that I can go to. And that's the 16 affirmations. In fact, they're on the back of my door here as a poster. And so that's what I focus on. It's a lesson I learned from Ben Franklin, had what he called 13 virtues. So at the age of 20, he was sailing from London back to Philadelphia. And he wrote the 13 virtues as a framework that he used for the rest of his life to define who he was when he was at his best. And that's what affirmations are. It's a way of defining yourself that says, this is who I am. This is when I'm at my best. And when I fall off the track, this is where I come back to as my touchstone. And it sets off a virtuous circle because it's who you become.
Got it. So you have them on your door so that they are a constant reminder for you.
Yeah, I have them in lots of places. It's the only document on my computer that's not in a folder. In other words, it's the most accessible document that I have on my computer. It's on my bedside. It's on my phone, obviously. And it's a way of talking to yourself that produces a desired outcome, as opposed to allowing yourself to be a product of all the, what for most of us is very negative self-talk.
Negative self-talk is a thing. There is no doubt. And of course, it's also a thing in our culture. It's not just self-talk. If it was just self-talk, I'm not sure it would be as big of a thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, we do live in a very negatively focused world, and naturally so. It's what to avoid. Knowing what to avoid is what kept cavemen alive.
Exactly.
Yeah. So
Yeah,
we
so our
run on
brain
negative feedback.
Our brain is hardwired to look for trouble, and that's how we survive saber-toothed tigers. And but the brain has never really developed another capability that acts as a counterpoint to that survival instinct, which of course we was necessary when it's saber-toothed tigers. We don't see saber-toothed tigers today, but we see lots and lots of problems, lots of challenges, lots of things that
we get triggered with that same
exactly.
That same fight, flight, freeze, or faint response. That the power of being aware of it. And it sounds like that was really part of the journey. And so we're having two conversations. One is the journey through the TEDx process and what happens after, because I'm just going to say this. Anybody listening, you do not have to be a suicide attempt survivor to be a TEDx speaker. I'm just saying there are other things you can talk about on the stage. This doesn't have to be your topic. And it doesn't matter what your topic is, the journey through the TEDx process is an amazing growth opportunity, because you do have to get beyond vulnerable. Is, Roger Killen is a brilliant man who's doing the Get Inspired talks now. And he got me through from vulnerable to being willing to be naked on the stage, and actually let people have a window into what it was like for me as the mother of a teen suicide attempt survivor, and what it was like hearing my daughter share her story publicly. And that was my story. And the power of doing that changed me as far as being willing to do whatever it took to be confident enough to take that stage. That was not an easy thing to do. So you were telling your personal story, and I'm going, John, the mindset shifts that you had to go through in order to get there. What happened after that for you? Because I know that it changes the perspective on the world when you wake up and you're still alive. At least that's what my daughter told me. So what happened for you when you realized you were still alive?
Well, in the moment that it occurred, I was angry. Because I was disappointed to find myself still alive. I was not one of those people that was crying for help. I literally was looking to pass away. And I came home that day, and my wife, didn't take long for her to discover that the story I had made up wasn't true, and she recognized as a result the injury that I had to my neck, and she saw it and got some advice from my brothers, and it was the three of them that actually created a place where I was given an opportunity to heal and recover. As it happened, about 3 months after my attempt, I also landed up in hospital for 22 nights with a liver condition, which I suspect was related from all of the stress that might have existed. And so I don't have too much recollection of what took place between 2011 and 2015. In fact, when I think back on it, Jackie, it's hard for me to imagine what I was thinking or feeling in those days, because it feels so foreign, like another lifetime ago, or someplace that just doesn't exist for me. And it was definitely the combination of the suicide attempt and then doing the TEDx talk, and more of the healing that came from it was a 180-degree pivot in my life, change of direction and focus. And I literally think back to that time and think, I don't know what in the world I was thinking. And as a result of all the changes that have been made, the last 5 years have been easily the best 5 years of my life, and I almost missed it. But it happened, I think, because of the two things. One is hitting a rock bottom, and then finding a way to heal from that and become the person I've always been capable of being, but was in some way or another hampered or unable to be that person. And either that or I take real good medication now. It's some combination that's allowed me to be who I am today.
Cool. That's lovely. And I'm certainly glad that you're around. Yeah, there is no doubt. And you said something really compelling. The idea that these last 5 years have been the best years of your life, and you almost missed them.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you almost missed them intentionally.
Well,
You didn't believe that it could change.
that's what happens is you get to a place where you don't know that it can change. You don't believe that it can change. And that's what's so debilitating about depression, that you just see it as there's no other possibility except the experience of depression. And yet the coping or dealing or the self-therapy, I did get therapy, by the way, as well, but all of that combination got me to a place where I became a different person.
So it sounds like it was a worthwhile journey.
It didn't have to be as painful.
I didn't mean to imply that it was easy, because I get the fact that it wasn't.
Yeah. The change has been worth it for sure.
Cool. So coming back to, you said that your 16 affirmations are based on Ben Franklin's 13 virtues.
Yeah.
And is the 16 affirmations, is this a list that you created or curated, or because I'm really interested in what they are, if you wouldn't mind sharing them, that would be lovely.
Yeah, I'm just going to open it. Let me just open the document. So they're not, can I share my screen?
I believe so, that you have that capacity.
This happens to be my set. There happens to be 16 of them.
Okay.
There are people that say 21 is ideal. And the tip I'll give anyone who's listening to this, if you go to and Google the phrase Jack Canfield, how to do affirmations, he's got a wonderful set of instructions on his page. It'll cost you your email to get access to it. I wrote the first set in 2007, and they didn't feel quite right. About 6 or 12 months later, I had an epiphany or some kind of moment, aha, and wrote the set that I just shared with you, and in about 20 minutes. And it's been my cornerstone ever since.
All right. Well, now you got to answer the question. What was the epiphany? What's the aha that made it possible for you to write your 16 affirmations in 20 minutes?
Well, it's kind of, I guess, the artistic process of creativity is I, chewed the cud, if I can use that expression, for 6 months. And then some place in my subconscious, all of that crystallized, and I was able to express it in 20 minutes. And so the reason I mention it is because if your experience is anything like mine, you'll complete the exercise and you'll have a bunch of affirmations and it won't feel right. It won't. And there's a great temptation to give up after that, or to kind of dismiss it, or it doesn't work or whatever. And my experience was that it took me 6 months to get to a place where it felt real.
So for the 6 months, you were reading the affirmations that you had written in the first set.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that's what you meant by chewing the cud. You were actually reading those affirmations.
Yeah.
They weren't quite right, but they were enough to get you to a place where then you had the shift and could write.
Exactly. Yes, exactly.
Cool. And the others have stood the test of time.
Correct. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. The brain loves the combination of both the familiar and the novel.
Yeah,
so yeah. I'm curious about what else you do because I know that the brain loves both of those. What else do you do? You have the 16 affirmations. Is there another practice that you add to those that you've added in or taken out?
Well, you said something earlier, which is Stephen Covey talks about being proactive. Is the first of the 7 habits of highly effective people, and his definition is the ability to be response able. In other words, to choose your response. And the way that he talks about it is there's a space between stimulus, something happening, and what you do about it. And that space is where you get to choose the response. And what you refer to as having the awareness, the mindfulness, the capability of recognizing that you've been triggered or affected by something. And instead of just instantly behaving as a result of the trigger, there's a space now where you get to make a different choice. And so I sometimes tease, but I'm still not very good with getting cut off in traffic. If someone cuts me off in traffic, there's not much space between stimulus and response there. I'm triggered by having someone get in my way, and so I've become better at creating that space between trigger and response, recognizing I just been triggered.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't say that I do it all the time, but one of the things that happens with affirmations is that as you think of your day and you're thinking about your affirmations, it gives you the opportunity to recognize, oh, I wasn't very good in that moment, or I could have been better in that moment. And so affirmations help create a space around mindfulness, because what Ben Franklin did, you might want to look up 13virtues.com. Go to 13virtues.com, and his virtues are there. And he had a scorecard. And so he would have the days of the week, and the x-axis, and the y-axis was the first three letters of each of the 13 virtues. And he made it a practice for the rest of his life to adopt one of the virtues each week. And as he says in his biography, he let the other 12 fall where they may. And he would spend that week focusing on that virtue and reflecting on his conduct that day, and estimating or otherwise reflecting on how well did he live up to his own expectations of himself. And he literally had a scorecard where he would make a mark if he felt like he could have been better. And so that's how affirmations work. And by some coincidence, if you have 13 of these things and you do one per week, it means you're rolling through them 4 times a year.
By some coincidence.
Yes.
Ben Franklin had an amazing ability to create systems.
Exactly. Yeah. He's a remarkable man.
He was the master of ADD, apparently, because that's the history that I have read of him. He actually was a very irritable, distractible young man. And that the things like a place for everything and everything in its place were these systems that he created to manage his own ADD. Right. And those are the tried and true systems that they use now for helping people manage ADD.
Well, the bit of wisdom or insight that Ben Franklin was able to give himself is the best way to get from a poor habit to a better habit isn't through willpower or discipline. It's a bit of fiction. It's a myth that we hold that it takes willpower or discipline. And the truth of it is that none of us have enough. Willpower and discipline are an easily consumed resource. And in fact, the best way to get from one habit to another is to create structure or a system. And so the example I'd like to offer, Jackie, is in one case, one person says, I'd like to lose weight. And that person says, I'll just be more mindful, be careful, eat more salad. And the other person says, I'm going to get this app on my phone, and I'm going to make a record of all the food that I eat, the types of food, the quantity, how much exercise I got. Which of those two is more likely to get a better outcome?
The one who's building awareness of their habits.
The one who's building a structure or a system or has a feedback loop. And so if you're considering, I'd like to get to a place with better habits, there's 2 things you can do for yourself. One is to build systems and structures. And number 2, which ties back, Jackie, to something we were talking about, is how you think of yourself. And this comes back to I ams, or the way you talk to yourself about yourself. So as an example of that, we're going to offer a cigarette to each of 2 people, both of which have said that they're going to quit. So one of them, you offer a cigarette, and that one says, no thanks, I'm trying to quit. And the other one says, no thanks, I am a non-smoker.
Mhm.
Which of those two is going to have a better outcome? The one who names themselves and identifies as the non-smoker, whereas the first one's still focused on cigarettes. And so how we talk to ourselves about ourselves, together with the systems and structures we build around ourselves, is the best way to get from a bad or a poor or undesirable habit to one that you prefer.
Cool. I like systems and structures. I noticed that your affirmations were like, I am respected.
Correct. Yeah.
And so the I ams, claiming them in present tense, giving myself that label, if you will. It's
Yeah.
probably the only place where labels don't limit us is when we are using them accurately in creating affirmations.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. So Carol Dweck wrote a book called Mindset, and she talks about fixed versus growth mindset. And so in that way, these are growth, create a growth mindset of possibility, unlimited futures, and aren't structured in a way where you're, where you're fixed or where you're saying, I can't do better than what I'm doing today.
You know, this thing about affirmations is so incredibly powerful. And there's actually now a program that I'd love to gift you because it's like a vision board affirmation maker on steroids. And it's designed to work with the brain. It's a neuroscience based thing. And so actually, I'll give it to everybody who's listening to this. It's up on a website, Emotional Teflon. Because we are bombarded with negative emotional messages all the time from both inside and outside our brains, which is what we've been talking about. And so this is a way of putting in a massive amount of positive images really quickly in like 3 to 5 minutes a day. And so we'll pop that. Thank you, Katie. So the link is there for everyone. And John, you know, especially for you, I would love to see your 16 virtues be put into this because you can customize it for yourself. And you know, it's just an amazing tool. And for when we're trying to change this mindset and get from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset, we're an uphill battle because of the massive number of negative images that we're exposed to every single day.
Yeah, it's about making an intentional choice that, as I mentioned earlier, that you have a counterweight, counterbalance, counterpoint to all of those otherwise negative signals we're getting, or that we're noticing actually, as much as noticing, and so proactively go out and create a counterweight. And so that's the only way that you can do the high wire act. You can't do it this way. And so when you have a counterweight, well, then that's what creates balance.
That's true. So creating the counterweights, and I love the resources, you know, being able to look at Benjamin Franklin's systems for his 13 virtues, Jack Canfield's system for writing affirmation. And let's talk about the system you have, because your system is very specifically focused on business. I mean, this is what you were doing, you know, prior to this journey that we've been talking about, and it's what you do now, right? Because who are the people who are the best people for you to work with? Who does that match up to for you? Who's your audience?
They're small business owners. They typically have a business of maybe $1 million to $6, $7, $8 million. They are working unbelievably hard, but they're feeling like they don't have control, or otherwise their business is overwhelming them. And it's typically because they're experiencing difficulties around some combination of time, team, or money. And so they're feeling like, I've got too much to do, not enough time to do it. I can't get everything done. If I don't do it, it won't get done. They may be saying around team, I can't hire the right team members. I can't get them to do the work at the level I need. I can't.
Have you been like listening in on my conversations?
No.
This sounds a lot like some of the self-talk I've been dealing with this last year.
Yeah. And money has to do with wanting better outcomes, sales and marketing, getting more money in the business and having better accounting. So the purpose of the kind of businesses that I'm describing here for the owner is to give them the life they want. No one was born to business or born to live, and often their business is not giving them that. And
Mhm.
ultimately what I do as a coach is help them get the systems, processes, tools in place that allows them to live their best life.
Cool. It's really a big key, because as an entrepreneur and a small business owner, having a life as well as having a business, people talk about work-life balance, but there's not a lot of really solid information that's easy to digest and implement.
Right.
Yeah. And so I love the fact when you offered to give us your 3 steps to a business that, and here we go, smoothly, profitably, and mostly without me. I was
Yeah.
like, oh, now that's a good title.
Yeah.
That's a book I will read, because smoothly, profitably, and mostly without me is my wish for the Teen Suicide Prevention Society. I
Right.
want the society to run mostly without me so that I can continue to run my business
Sure.
and continue to do what I love to do.
Yeah.
And I want it to make a big impact in the world. So
Yeah.
I really appreciate your gift, John. I am looking
Thank you.
forward to it a great deal. Where did the idea of putting it into 3 steps come from?
Well, mostly from experience in a group of coaches that I worked together with, that we discovered that we had experiences of working with business owners that are approximately the same, and together we built out this program that acts as a framework, as a system by which you can get to wherever you are today, to ultimately a place where your business thrives even when you're not there.
Cool.
They sound like a dream to lots of people, but or unattainable, but in fact it's quite possible.
It's amazing that it is the belief of whether or not it's possible that determines whether someone will even pick up a book like this.
Yeah.
If they don't believe it's possible to have that kind of a business, then the book won't even become on their radar screen, no matter how many times they would have it put in front of them.
Well,
Yeah.
I'll give you the key that'll unlock the principle.
Oh, cool.
So it's easy to say, it's hard to do. So my riddle is this: how do they get those French fries to taste the same, whether they're made in Moscow, your hometown, or Hong Kong? The French fries are made by a 16-year-old, and the parents of that 16-year-old can't get him or her to clean their bedroom. How do they do that? Well, they have great systems, great recipes, great processes. And so the key is this idea that systems run your business, people run your systems, you lead your people. And so if you believe that people run your business, then as people come and go, so your business fluctuates with that. Whereas if you've got systems in place, here's how we do French fries, those systems can be replicated, and that's what allows you to scale. And that's also what allows you, the owner, to know what's being done with or without your presence, because they're operating the system you've created.
Okay. Systems run your business. People run the systems.
Correct.
And the owner's job is to lead the people.
Exactly.
Okay.
Right.
So cool. So that's an amazingly simple system.
Yes. Yeah, it's simple in concept. It's if it was easy, everyone would do it, and that's the part that I help with. Is I help business owners apply that idea to their business.
So you help make it easy.
Yes.
I like that about you. John, this is a delightful journey that we are on. And the purpose of the journey is to help people understand that no matter if they have been on the ledge or have even left off the ledge, they're still here. And the ledge can be a turning point in their life, but there's a journey that goes with it.
Yeah.
And so your journey was through the TEDx stage experience.
Yeah,
And what happened after that was you were a business coach before then, right?
correct.
You're a business coach now.
Yes.
So you're still doing what you were doing, but what's different?
Yeah, so I was in a very difficult place I've been a business coach for 15 years, 5 of which I was in a very difficult personal place.
Mm-hmm.
And my practice suffered as a result. I wasn't very successful in that middle 5 years. It was reasonably moderately successful in the first 5, not so much in the middle 5, and off the charts extraordinarily successful by most people's standards the last 5. So I had that middle period where I needed or got the opportunity to have a think.
I think it's like a cocoon
Yeah,
and it was during that period of time that you actually decided to take your story to the stage.
yes.
Yeah. So so the first 5 you were moderately successful, but it wasn't enough to mitigate the depression. Success does not mitigate depression. It's a common
No,
myth.
and the depression was sort of a culmination or brought into focus as a result of the grieving from my mom's death, and that grieving wasn't completely or thoroughly processed. And one of the 5 stages of grief is depression, and I got stuck in that stage for a long time.
Got it. So then after the suicide attempt, you were in the cocoon, if you will, and that's where you worked more in your grieving?
Well, that was kind of a pivotal point in life, a culmination, inflection point. Let me describe it that way. And um,
A flexion point. Okay.
inflection, yeah. So instead of taking this road, I took that path.
Got it. Thank
And
you.
the happy circumstance coincident of getting ready to do the TEDx talk was ultimately led to the best kind of therapy I could have had, and that led to a different set of outcomes, and
Mm-hmm.
so it was that I honestly have to say it was because of the work I did to get prepared for the TED Talk that changed my mindset, and that gave me the insight to think about things in a different way, happier way, more productive way.
So
Um,
that shifted your thinking then. And now you've had explosive business growth after taking a risk that you thought could end your career.
correct. And so if there's a way to sort of close the circle here, is that if I'm an example of one, I don't believe that's true, but from the worst place to the best place is possible. And so what matters more is not what you might be experiencing in the moment you're thinking about or contemplating. In fact, let me be a witness that says it can and does. And it's possible for you to have your best life as well.
There we go. You can, and it's possible to have your best life as well.
Yeah.
Cool. John, thank you very much for being willing to share your story with us today. I greatly appreciate it.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here.